Hey gossip lovers! News and Rachel Zegler has just lived every actor's nightmare, watching her own movie vanish into thin air. Disney's highly anticipated Snow White remake was supposed to be a billion-dollar blockbuster. Instead, it flopped. So hard that even Disney seems embarrassed to talk about it. The film, which had all the hype surrounding it, quickly turned into a PR disaster. The stunning cast, the breathtaking visuals, and the revamped script were all meant to revive Disney's classic animated treasure. But instead, Snow White became a textbook example of how even the biggest brands can crash and burn. So, what really happened? Was this film always going to flop? Or were there serious mistakes made along the way? Was Disney's inability to recover from these mistakes what caused the movie's demise? Let's break down the full story. Let's start with the numbers because, in Hollywood, the bottom line speaks the loudest, and Snow White's numbers were downright catastrophic. The film, expected to make a huge splash at the box office, opened to a surprisingly low return. Disney had set their hopes high, anticipating that the film would perform similarly to The Little Mermaid, which had brought in $117 million on its opening weekend. But Snow White? It barely scraped by with a fraction of that. It wasn't just disappointing, it was humiliating. Compared to other live-action Disney remakes, Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin both earned north of $100 million on opening weekend. But Snow White didn't even come close. The film's opening was an embarrassment, leaving audiences, critics, and even Disney executives stunned. What made the box office results even worse was the complete lack of any real engagement. Empty theaters were a common sight, and what made matters even worse were social media reactions that mocked how quickly the film disappeared from people's radar. Fans were making memes comparing Snow White's opening weekend to a ghost town, and the movie became a laughingstock among fans of Disney's past remakes. To make matters even worse, it quickly became clear that people weren't just skipping this movie, they were actively avoiding it. The box office was one disaster, but the film's premiere took awkwardness to a whole new level. Imagine walking into a movie theater expecting all the glamour that comes with a Hollywood blockbuster premiere. The red carpets, flashing cameras, and packed theaters with excited fans. And instead, you're greeted by a nearly empty room. That's exactly what happened at the premiere for Snow White. Rachel Zegler, the star of the film, found herself at the center of a social media firestorm when photos of her at the almost empty premiere went viral. People were stunned by the lack of a crowd. After all, Disney's Snow White was supposed to be one of the biggest films of the year, but things didn't stop there. One particular meme from the premiere instantly went viral. In a funny yet tragic moment, Zegler was seen sitting in the theater while telling someone, "2 tickets, please," mocking the lack of people attending her own movie's premiere. Fans jumped on this moment and turned it into a viral joke, suggesting it was a metaphor for how Snow White had bombed so spectacularly. Zegler herself even shared some of the memes, but it was clear that the tone wasn't one of pride. It was an unfortunate reminder that things had gone terribly wrong. At the same time, Zegler's infamous comment about how people would line up to see her movies resurfaced, making the already dire situation even worse. The internet, of course, never forgets, and the once bolstered self-confidence she had displayed in interviews came back to haunt her. People online were quick to point out the glaring contrast between Zegler's bold declaration and the stark reality of Snow White's empty theaters. The memes were endless. Well, they did line up at the exits. This type of schadenfreude from the internet only added fuel to the fire of her public humiliation. It wasn't just about her comment, it was about the public perception of her as someone who believed her own hype and got ahead of herself. The memes, jokes, and viral posts all served to expose the disconnect between what Zegler had expected and the harsh reality of the situation. The timing couldn't have been worse. Her words now served as an ironic reflection of the movie's failure. While the public ridicule was one thing, behind the scenes, there were also whispers of tension between Zegler and her co-star Gal Gadot. Reports began to surface that suggested Zegler's social media presence and outspoken opinions were causing friction with Gadot. While it's hard to know exactly what went on, the speculation only fueled more drama. One major event that reignited the rumored feud was their interaction at the Oscars. While on stage, the two actresses appeared distant, and body language experts jumped on the moment, reading into every gesture. Fans who had already heard rumors about a strained relationship jumped to conclusions, thinking that the two weren't as friendly as they had appeared on screen. Gadot, an established Hollywood star, was reported to be somewhat annoyed by Zegler's social media antics and public remarks, which only seemed to add fuel to the fire. This behind-the-scenes tension, whether true or not, added another layer of complexity to an already messy PR situation. The media loved the drama, and it became clear that the on-screen chemistry between the stars wasn't as strong as fans had hoped. At this point, Disney was in full damage control mode. The studio knew it had a major problem on its hands, and they began scrambling to mitigate the damage. Public relations teams were working overtime, and several of Zegler's controversial comments were quickly deleted or taken down. The studio attempted to reshape the narrative surrounding the movie, but their efforts felt too little, too late. One particularly embarrassing moment came when Disney's social media team tried to push a campaign highlighting the movie's diverse cast. But this just backfired, as it only reminded audiences of the film's major departures from the original. Fans who were excited for the Snow White remake were confused and frustrated by the film's creative choices. Disney's PR strategies felt disjointed and poorly executed. In fact, the entire social media campaign felt tone-deaf, with Disney attempting to change the narrative without addressing the core issues: the film's lackluster performance, negative, audience reactions, and the tension surrounding the cast. Rather than fixing the damage, Disney only seemed to amplify the controversy. Before Snow White even hit theaters, one controversy had already rocked the film: Peter Dinklage's criticism of the portrayal of dwarfs in the movie. Dinklage, who is an outspoken advocate for marginalized groups in Hollywood, criticized Disney for using the traditional depiction of dwarfs in the film, calling it offensive and outdated. His comments sparked a larger conversation about the use of stereotypes in Hollywood, especially in modern remakes of classic films. Disney, in response, decided to scrap the traditional portrayal of dwarfs and replace them with CGI characters, something that only made the situation worse. Rather than addressing the root issue, Disney seemed to go for a quick fix by removing the dwarfs entirely from the narrative and replacing them with bizarre-looking CGI versions of the characters. The backlash from fans was swift, as audiences were confused and repulsed by the strange CGI characters, which only added to the film's list of failings. The CGI dwarfs quickly became a meme, and the internet exploded with criticism, with fans questioning Disney's decision to ignore the original source material and make such a drastic, controversial change. Instead of pleasing anyone, the CGI dwarfs only alienated both purists and new viewers, creating yet another reason why the film failed to connect with audiences. When you think of a Disney premiere, you probably picture an extravagant affair: bright lights, the iconic red carpet, the who's who of Hollywood, and fans lining up to get a glimpse of their favorite stars. For a movie like Snow White, which had so much anticipation surrounding it, one would expect nothing less than a grand event. But that's not what happened. Instead, Disney chose to keep things under wraps, avoiding the massive spectacle that's typically associated with their live-action remakes. They didn't roll out the red carpet in Los Angeles, Paris, or New York. Instead, the premiere was held in a quiet corner of Spain with very little media attention. There were no high-profile celebrity interviews or lavish promotional tours. In fact, there was little to no buzz about the event at all, and the media coverage was shockingly sparse for a film of this magnitude. It felt like Disney was trying to distance themselves from the project rather than celebrate it. This decision was absolutely telling. For one, it sent a message that Disney didn't want to draw attention to the film or its underwhelming performance. The muted premiere could be seen as a way for Disney to quietly step back from the disaster. The movie wasn't generating the excitement they had hoped for, and the last thing the studio wanted was for the premiere to be a media circus, drawing more focus to the film's struggles. In other words, it was a conscious decision to underplay the event, perhaps because they knew the inevitable failure would be hard to hide behind the glitz and glamour of a traditional premiere. It wasn't just the lack of glitz that signaled trouble, it was the lack of confidence in the film that stood out. Disney, a company known for meticulously planning and promoting its movies, was now in damage control mode. There was no excitement in the air, no bold statements about how this film would revive their brand. Instead, the premiere felt more like a formality, something they had to do but didn't want to spend too much time or money on. The lack of any high-energy promotional events, like the world tours or celebrity interviews that would normally accompany a film of this magnitude, was not only a sign of caution, but a glaring indicator of the movie's lackluster reception. Even more telling was the media silence that surrounded the premiere. Where were the glowing reviews? The raving interviews from cast members? Normally, Disney releases a barrage of content leading up to the premiere, making sure that everyone is hyped up for the movie. For Snow White, that didn't happen. The social media accounts for both the studio and the stars themselves remained strangely quiet, with minimal posts, no behind-the-scenes content, and very few updates. Compare this to the lavish promotional campaigns for The Lion King, Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast, where Disney unleashed a full-scale marketing blitz. There was no urgency to promote Snow White, and when they did promote it, it felt more like a last-ditch effort to salvage what little reputation the film had left. When the studio does a soft launch like this, it's a signal to industry insiders that they know the movie isn't living up to expectations. Hollywood thrives on buzz. If a film isn't drawing in audiences and press attention, it's considered a failure in the eyes of the public. By toning down the premiere, Disney not only admitted that they were aware of Snow White's potential flop, but they were also trying to avoid further embarrassment. This muted premiere wasn't just a poor reflection of the film's performance, it was an act of survival for the studio. Instead of facing the harsh reality of a massive flop head-on, Disney chose to downplay the event, hoping that the world would simply forget about it. But of course, in today's world of social media and constant media coverage, it didn't work. The internet caught wind of it, and the story only gained more traction. Instead of sweeping things under the rug, Disney only made the absence of a major premiere a focal point, adding fuel to the fire of the film's growing reputation as a failure. So, what went wrong? Was it the casting choices? The poorly executed PR strategies? The controversies surrounding the film's production? Or was this just a doomed project from the start? Disney made one mistake after another, from the disastrous box office results to the tension behind the scenes and the controversies that never stopped. The film's failure was a combination of poor decisions, bad timing, and a lack of understanding of what audiences truly wanted. Disney miscalculated, and in the end, they paid the price for it. But what do you think? Was this a case of bad decisions leading to a disaster, or was Snow White always going to flop? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's discuss what went wrong. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into Hollywood's biggest disasters.